we've now come to the end of our 4 presentations, which were, I mean, all of them were so fantastic, and have provided such a lot of food for thought. So I now am going to open up the floor to you, the audience, to ask questions. I should say that just a couple of things. First of all, that the issue of Israel-Palestine can generate very deeply held points of view and heated debate. That's diversity of viewpoints and heated debate is fine, but please, you must keep it respectful. My second point is that, you know, amongst the audience, there may be people with different levels of familiarity and knowledge of what's happening in Palestine. So please don't be shy to ask questions that you think maybe are too obvious. You know, I'm sure that there are, you know, you won't be the only one who wants to ask that question. So I'm sure that all of the panelists will be open to answering more general questions or historical questions about the situation in Israel-Palestine, as well as going into more detail about the issues that they've presented today. So Goldie, can I just ask you, what's the best way to do the questions? People put them in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I'll read them out, or yeah.
Thanks, Nicola. I think it's best that everyone just put their questions in the chat or comments. And then Nicola, if you don't see something, I might pick it up, and or if any of the co-hosts, if any of the speakers want to pick up something in the chat, please feel free to do so. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you can ask a question to a specific person or to the panel in general.
I see one question there already, Nicola.
Okay, great.
It's, I think, from Hussein Gudaskar. How do you see the role of Iran in these conflicts?
Okay, great. Are there any other questions?
Not right away, but there's a comment saying thank you to all the speakers. This has already been an amazing event, so which I completely concur.
Great. Okay. So we'll does anybody want to answer a question about the role of Iran?
Really, I mean, this is a more regional, it's one of the powers in the region. They have their own vested interest. I would like to focus on, you know, Palestine and Israel and the situation.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, it is a bit beyond the scope of what we set out to do in the seminar today. As somebody who is obviously teaching international politics of the Middle East, I would say that the role of Iran is probably less significant than the role of the US when it comes to understanding some of the dynamics of recent events, for example. The US is the major supporter for Israel and for Israel's military capacity, whereas Iran's influence, I think, has waned over time, actually. I mean, at one point they were a supporter of Hamas. I don't think that close relationship exists anymore.
Yeah, I see a question in the chat, Nicola. Right. It's from Andy Hersham, who says, how can we bring the thousands of supporters of Palestine in Coventry together with the many hundreds who protested at Warwick Uni recently? And should I put a couple of questions together?
Yeah.
And then for Hadil specifically, writing and speaking about this, I think, requires a lot of courage, fortitude, and perseverance. Oh, sorry, I can't speak today.
Perseverance.
Perseverance, thank you. I imagine the environment you're working in is also academically contentious. How do you cope self-care and support?
Okay, so Hadil, would you like to go first? You've been involved in activities as well on campus, so you might be able to join both of those questions.
Yeah, so for the first one, that's something that I've thought about because work is kind of disconnected from the wider community because it's, at the edge of the city, and it creates this disconnect between the local community and then the academic sphere. So yeah, I think there's we need to kind of try to build a stronger connection with Coventry University because it's at the heart of Coventry, and try to make things more accessible. I think with COVID, generally, because things have been online, it's helped people branch out from exclusively academic spaces and to build connections wider than that. So I think we need to find a way to make that even more sustainable in the long run, not just like in terms of work and Coventry, but also to try and branch out beyond purely academic spaces. Yeah, if anyone wants to add anything to that question.
I can add just quickly, just to say, yeah, like that. I think there's so much potential and opportunities in also speaking to different audiences, because again, Palestine is framed as different issues to different people, and I think it's really important if we center based on Palestinian experience and the call of PDS and other collectives on like centering Palestine as a justice issue. Whether we speak about environmental activism and climate justice activism, or we speak about human rights and equity, or cases of like anti-racism. So the important thing is to start conversation, and the fact that there's so many great organizations that have done amazing work on the ground inside Palestine and also in the UK and other places that we can actually build on their great work as well. So that's all I wanted to add.
This is also linked, I think this is very, very well, Mona, linked to the internationalization, the international solidarity, the connection around other social justice issues that we share, we can talk about, and also we can learn from other struggles, I think. And I think it's also, yes, it's an opportunity for a new entry to connect with other struggles around the world, which I personally will share a lot of the principles and the values. So I think that is a very important development. Particularly, I could see this has happened in the last month. There is a growing interest in this connection.
I mean, just to follow up on those comments, which are all, I think, really spot on, but I think there is maybe a question about organizations and the role of having organizational links, because I think actually there's a lot of informal links between, for example, Warwick University, people in Coventry. I mean, many people who study and work at Warwick University are also members of the community in Coventry. So there are those informal linkages, but it's also important, I think, to have, to think about the role of organizations, what sort of organizational structures could facilitate more sustained activism. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that.
If not, I think we can, there's more questions popping up on the chat. So the next one is from Moara. I hope I'm pronouncing names right. Thank you all for this great panel. Considering the various points raised by some concerned with the rights-based approach advocacy in relation to an anti-colonial approach to the struggle, I'm assuming that's a human rights approach versus an anti-colonial framework. How do you think we can move on to give a more radical content to frameworks such as apartheid? I think I'll leave that one first because the other one is a different question.
Great question. Who wants to answer first? Mona, do you want to have a go?
I wanted, yeah, to kind of continue on what Marwan was saying about kind of, how do we build alliances from this point forward? I think the right-based approach has served, in the decades, especially, after the establishment of the creation of the Palestinian Authority, and the fact that kind of this two-state solution was kind of seen as the blueprint solution for Palestine. And I think we have come to a point where it's not on the fringe that Palestinians and international advocates and activists are saying, okay, we have been saying it for decades, that this is a dead process and this approach is not viable anymore. So I think moving on to more a kind of an anti-colonial, a decolonial approach is the way forward, because we cannot, again, speak of only rights-based. The fact that we kind of speak about more equal rights for Palestinians who live inside Israel, we've seen that not really working. And actually what it ended up doing is disenfranchising this community even further. And because the conditions under which the state operates are exclusionary, are supremacist in nature. So we cannot really speak of an only rights-based approach. I think a rights-based approach serves for specific objectives, but I think we need to also combine it with more decolonial approaches. And this is where we build on, and I think this work has been done already, but we need to kind of really consolidate our efforts in our different areas of expertise and research and so on. So this is how I see it.
Thanks. Marwan, did you want to say anything on that? Oh.
Yeah, I think that as Jan was going, are you going?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, if I want, like, the way I understand a human rights approach, the danger here is that it reproduces Palestinians as victims. This is like the framework of a new liberal approach. And what we have seen recently through Palestinian resistance, we can see the agency of people in resisting, like the settler colony. Like we as Palestinians, we are indigenous people living under occupation. And it's obvious here that in resistance, we are in battle of existence. What happened in Jerusalem and in Sheikh Jarrah, it took us to the beginning, to the ethnic cleansing and its ongoing Nakba. So this is like what we mean by, even, I don't call it decolonial, I call it anti-colonial, anti-colonial approach. So we still like in ongoing resistance against the ongoing settler colonial that like we witness and we seen in Sheikh Jarrah. So as Mona said, it's not viable approach, no war. And what happened on the ground proves that it doesn't work.
Hadil, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add on what Ashjan was saying, is that the human rights framework relies on Palestinians presenting themselves as helpless victims and playing into the politics of sympathy. And that's why whenever Palestinians start resisting, it's always as if, oh, now you've lost international support, because the framework relies on you always staying in that box of being helpless and needing international organizations and people from outside to come and help you. So what it does is that it depoliticizes people, because it conditions them that we will only help you if you present yourself as helpless to us.
Marwan?
I think people, they realize that, they live that, they're conscious, they are aware of it. Just to give you the example of last month, when the Palestinians from inside, from within Israel, wanted to go to Al-Aqsa, and the Israeli police put checkpoint in road number 1, which is from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, to stop the Palestinians from going. They didn't just sat and sort of accept it. They start walking on the road to Jerusalem. And then people in East Jerusalem, when they heard about it, they send cars and buses to meet them in the way to take them, which is an hour, 2 hours later, the Israeli police said, okay, go back to the buses and continue. Now, this in the consciousness of people makes it the connection between what we're doing and what we're doing inside and what you're doing in Jerusalem or happening in Gaza. It's interconnected. It is part of a systemic thing that and that is there in the living experience of people. And when they face it, makes it even more apparent and more blunt for them, and obviously motivate them to resist it.
Thanks. Next question, Goldie.
Yeah. Sure. So this is a slight shift in register, and I think the next one, of course, comes back to the question of solutions. But let's take this one from Naomi. Given the role of censorship that Hadil illuminated, how do you see the future role of social media in activism for Palestine?
Great. Hadil, did you want to start off with that one?
Sure. I think despite the censorship, it's still a useful tool. So, and I think because of how much people mobilized and exposed the censorship that was happening by Instagram and Facebook, I think it's become very obvious. So I think it's still a viable tool to mobilize people, to educate people. But also, I think sometimes people over rely on social media as being the only tool, and I feel like it creates a disconnect where people see online activism as, I mean, their activism is purely online activism, and I think, like I noticed that there's this huge disconnect between the level of awareness you see on social media versus in real life. So regardless, I think people should try to stay rooted with the circles around them, because if, for example, Twitter was an accurate representation of reality, then everyone around us would be pro-Palestine and leftist and radical. But I think there's a disconnect there.
That's a really important point.
Yeah, just to add on to that really great point by Hadil is that, again, yeah, like it has to be kind of like there has to be some sort of triangulation or tries of like yeah, building on your knowledge that you gain through social media and like complementing it with great, initiatives. Again, I go back to the work of initiatives and institutions that have done so much that we can learn more, we can advocate better, that we can really build better activism mechanisms against, this attacks against Palestinians on social media. And another thing I wanted to add is organization like Hamla, which is kind of for digital rights. They've been really monitoring the amount of hate speech. The people have been sending, complaints about posts that have been removed and accounts that have been censored, and they've been really doing such great advocacy work in also ensuring that type of conduct by these big social media companies are being exposed and held to account. So I think this is also a great way. But again, as Hadil said, it is not enough because online is a virtual world, but we need to make sure that also our work on the ground is equally powerful.
Very good. So we have another, because we've only got 9 minutes left. So let's see if we can get maybe a few more questions in.
Okay. I think I'm going to condense the next question a little bit from Mike. Basically, it's a question about, do the panelists see any hope in grassroots work between Palestinians and Israelis to lay foundations for a future single state?
Who would like to take that question?
I will take it. Yeah, I'll take it, Nicola, because sometimes I get a stick also for taking these questions. But well, my vision is, as I said, to decolonize, liberate the oppressor, because I also believe that the state violence of Israel is also harming Israeli Jewish society. So in the first Intifada, if you look, there was hundreds of Israeli organizations that mushrooms during this Intifada in support of the Palestinians. And it's only happened because the protest being led and the agency came from the Palestinian. So you had social workers who were supporting, you had psychologists, you have groups of, then the people who refused to go to the army or refused to serve in the West Bank. These are a very, very important people who boycott, don't want to go and serve in the Israeli army, is very, very important activism that we have to highlight and support. So how much that will happen, we know Israeli society now, for example, it's you know, Netanyahu in compared to Bennett is like in the center. He is the prime minister of Israel at the moment. He is the leader of the settler movement. So I don't want to give up on trying to address the Israeli society, because I see the vision of that society in the future is with them. So I want that dialogue to start. And I think it's not an easy question. There is a lot of debate among us Palestinians, what and how much we can have this dialogue. Do you have to accept BDS? Do you have to accept certain sort of principles to be able to engage in dialogue? But the principle is that we have to win more sections of this society to increase the pressure on the Israeli government. And this can happen from the Palestinians and from internationally. I am, as an academic, I will say to scholars or Israeli scholars that I am not going to work with you because Tel Aviv University plays such and such a role. Bar Ilan University plays such and such a role on keeping the status quo and supporting the maintenance of the occupation. I hope that sort of helped in raising the question. Don't know about others if you want to.
Yeah, no, thanks, Marwan. I mean, I think this is the really important aspect of settler colonialism as opposed to just colonialism. You know, the settler colonialism, decolonization, the vision of decolonization needs to incorporate a vision for transforming the settler. Otherwise, that decolonization won't occur. So, yeah. Thanks, Marwan. Mona, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I agree with Marwan, and I really wanted to kind of highlight two things about that type of mobilization, if it happens, that kind of joint struggle. If, first of all, it's centered around Palestinians, rather than about just the objective of, the fact that we live in this same geographic area means that we both have equal rights for self-expression and for mobilization. I think this is really important, that Israelis need to acknowledge the privileges that they have been living under because of this settler colonial system. And I think only then we can, when Israelis understand the power asymmetry that the system has created for their benefit, and the exclusionary character of the state that has been created in Palestine, then only we can speak about, then we'll have a common ground to talk about decolonization. Because most of as we know, the Israeli left is non-existent today, and whatever remains on the margin are leaving Israel to live in other places and other countries, leaving behind a more radicalized and right-wing society that we see today. How the yearly marches into Jerusalem are chanting the same incitement of violence and elimination that we have seen throughout the decade. We're not really seeing any positive change. But again, once the individuals and Israeli society realize that this is the case, that they have to confront that legacy of settler colonialism, only then we can speak about a joint struggle. And yeah, otherwise, as Marwan said, like again, BDS is explicitly saying we cannot really cooperate with institutions that are affiliated with the Israeli government. So if individuals start changing and making sure that they detach themselves from the institutions, this is also another step forward. But yeah, that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Mona. Do we have one? Do we have time for?
I'm happy for people to go on. I mean, over 10 minutes or something, if all the speakers are okay with that.
Okay, I think the how many questions are there left in the chat?
I can make them into a couple, I think.
Okay.
Well, so I'm going to combine two of the questions. I think they're both about solidarity. So one of the questions is really asking whether solidarity and understanding of solidarity can be shifted or framed in terms of Palestinians themselves or the Palestinian diaspora instead of non-Palestinians. And then I think the next one coupled with that is really saying that maybe Western solidarity needs to be decolonized because it's on a savior complex.
Okay, great. That's great. And whilst we're talking about solidarity, I think, I invite the speakers to also perhaps make some concrete suggestions to people attending today who might want to know how they can, what's the best way for them to support Palestinians and show solidarity. Great. So shall we start with Ashjan?
Yeah, like if I want to talk about solidarity, because like my presentation was today on Gaza, and we mentioned like the children who died. So hundreds of Palestinian children died from British-made weapons that are used in the Israeli wars against people. So this is one element of solidarity. When I participated in the protests in London, like thousands of protesters gathered and marched toward Israeli embassy in this like large, huge demonstration. It's estimated 200. And I noticed that most of like the signs and the focuses on this, it focused on British-made weapon. So if I think of solidarity, this is one of the things like we need to organize a protest and build on what we have seen and like raise awareness about what happens, the situation on the ground, like bring voices of people who lived on Palestine. For example, I appreciate this event today. Like Nicola and Mona, the idea came about it. This is one of like raising awareness and to bring the voices of Palestinian and what happens on like the on the ground. So this is like what I thought of solidarity. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, Nicola, I would say one should think, what is their position? Where are they? Where they locate themselves? Are they students? Are they lecturers? Are they, what is their job? And try first there to say, this is my place. I want to, my union, my university, my school to, and if you look at it, it's across society that I would say the attack is happening. So start where you are. I would say, just to give you an example, my local MP is Labour support, have a majority. In the petition that's been just submitted to the House of Commons, I noticed that 1,390 something signed the petition. I wrote to them, I said, look, there are such a number of people from your constituency who signed this petition. We would like you to participate in the debate. We want to know what is your position. So this is at the local level, your church, you can be involved. At the national level is the
Marwan, can you just clarify what debate, what petition and what debate was that?
Well, there was a debate in the House of Commons to an emergency debate on arm export to Israel and the current situation. So that some of the MPs, they can get away with it, while their constituencies actually have a very clear position. And this is the people we voted so, don't let them, hold them accountable. Hold them, as I said, I noticed that in my constituency, 1,300 or almost 1,400 people signed the petition. And we said to the MP, this is very important and significant issue for your constituency. We want you to reflect our views in this debate. So that's at the top level. And other campaigns that the BDS or holding the British government accountable to international law. Why to the ICC? It is good for one leadership. It's good for Sudan, but not good for Israel. Is it good for certain countries, but Israel is exempted from that? That is the accountability that we need to hold people, in power.
Thanks, Marwan. Mona?
Just to complement also what Ashan and Marwan mentioned about solidarity. I also think, definitely it's a personal, in addition to being a collective effort, for instance, Palestine is an environmental justice issue. It's a climate justice issue. So if we also apply it to our own kind of interest and our expertise, we can also advocate for Palestine in that way. It doesn't always have to be in this overarching, Palestine justice for Palestinians, but we can also find ways into which to make our contribution more meaningful. When the Palestinian trade union declared the strike, this is where this type of solidarity can happen between trade unions, for instance, in Coventry, in the Midlands, and elsewhere, to raise awareness of these collectives and these communities. Same with academics, same with students, and so on and so forth. So I think these type of let's say micro level type of solidarity, depending on where we are, what's our situation, who we are in our different expertise and different places. And I really wanted to just quickly agree with Riham about what she said about activism in general, and the fact that we also, me as a Palestinian, I've been called a couple of times to speak about water issues in Palestine, but kind of the dominance of a certain narrative and a certain group of people in solidarity activism in the UK is sometimes also deterring Palestinians from taking part, because we're only asked to be as speakers. Again, this is what we face in the mainstream media, as Hadid mentioned, at the fact that you bring the Palestinian face, you bring a Palestinian voice, but only to speak a certain or to play a certain role, but never to be part and parcel of a solution. So I think this is what solidarity also needs in the UK, like being part in collaboration with Palestinians, not just bringing Palestinians to share their story, to share their suffering, but also to collaborate, to think together, to build bridges of solidarity and collaboration, and really be part of a decolonial solidarity.
Thanks, Mona. So I leave Hadil for the last word. Can I just ask Hadil also, in addition to anything else you were going to say, could you just say something about the divestment campaign at Warwick?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the divestment thing. So, divestment, do you mean like basically explain the situation and what happened?
Yeah, well, brief. I mean, we don't need to go into too many of the dirty details, but briefly, just to say something about, you know, Warwick's involvement in the arms trade and the campaign on campus to get the university to divest.
Yeah, so Warwick has investments in BAE Systems and JCB, and even in its careers fairs, it has connections with like the British Army and something, I forgot the name, something atomic weapons or something. So the divestment motion was basically a motion for to be able to lobby the university to end these investments, not only in things related to Palestine, but in any companies that are environmentally harmful or in violation of human rights. So in this motion, only one of the examples was actually about Israeli war crimes, and the motion did pass through the Students' Union, but it faced a legal challenge from UK Lawyers for Israel. And it's been an entire academic year since then, and still the proposers of the motion haven't been able to act act on the basis of the motion because of this legal challenge. So yeah, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so basically we're trying to work on a BDS campaign outside of the Students' Union, because if we keep trying to work within the framework of the Students' Union, it first of all requires to be able to constantly have people in the SU who are willing to put in the work, and it's not sustainable. And also we have these institutional challenges. So if we build something more on the ground between students and staff, it's more sustainable in the long run. So we're trying to work on that for next year. So yeah, that's on the divestment motion. And just for like closing words on what we were talking about, someone mentioned anti-occupation groups and the white saviorism. I think, yeah, I feel like anti-occupation, like the occupation obviously has fragmented Palestinians into like Gaza, the West Bank, and 48. And the thing about anti-occupation groups is that it treats the occupation as purely a West Bank issue. So if Palestinians are fragmented, then we can't have our solidarity also be fragmented into purely the West Bank. It's counterproductive, and it kind of treats as if the issue in the West Bank is separate from what's happening in 1948 Palestine. So it only perpetuates the colonial idea of like, this is Palestine and that's Israel. So I think we need to basically change the language around solidarity. And in terms of like practical things that we can do moving forward, definitely BDS. And also when we work on things like decolonizing the curriculum, we also have to talk about university investments, because what's the point of decolonizing the curriculum so that a bunch of students sitting in the UK can learn from a decolonized syllabus when their tuition fees are going towards arms companies? It's a contradiction. So conversations on decolonization have to also include things like BDS and work on the ground. So yeah, that's it for me.
Say something about the initiative that we have also in Coventry, that only last month we learned that Spanish company CAF, who is leading the project of building the railway in East Jerusalem in the middle of Sheikh Jarrah, having offices in the Techno Park in Coventry University. And we, with the consultation with Palestine Solidarity, we had a letter that more than 300 staff and students signed within a week. And we sent it to the VC before the AGM of CAF, which held in Spain, to put more pressure on the shareholder to say that this is also pressure coming from Coventry. We haven't heard from the Vice Chancellor. We wrote to the Board of Governors with the support of the union. And this is an example of something that we included students, staff, academic or non-academic, on a basic issue. Is this is what we want our university to look like in terms of the image and respect or violation of international law. And I think this is this is sort of examples that we can, where we can initiate and lead. So we might, the next step, if the university is going to keep quiet about it, we are going to bring it to Coventry and Warwick community, to the community actually. We had some suggestions that we want to involve community in this process, but we will see. There is a meeting on the 23rd of June with the university.
Yeah, keep us posted on that. Yeah, I think there's a huge potential for a Coventry-wide campaign, because a lot of local people are also very concerned about the arms industry. And I mean, there's a long-standing tradition within Coventry of sort of that aspect of the peace movement. Anyway, sorry, I won't keep you any longer, because I'm sure you all want to go and enjoy your Thursday evening now. I want to thank the audience for all your great questions, and I'm sorry if we didn't manage to answer all of your questions, but thank you for contributing to such an engaging event. And most of all, I want to thank the speakers, who were just phenomenal. I mean, that all of you brought I learned something from all of you, and I'm sure that the audience members have done so too. So thank you so much. And again, thank you to Goldie for all your support on the technical side, and to Maria as well, Maria de Marpero, and to the Centre for Social Theory and the Centre for the Study of Women and Gender. So I wish you all a good evening, and keep talking about Palestine.
Big thank you to Goldie and Nicola.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. As you said, Nicola, this it was phenomenal to hear from all of you speakers, and you really highlighted from the very minutiae of the local in our everyday lives, in our universities, in our wider communities in Coventry, to this transnational, translocal, what every one of us can do something. I think that was really important, like my one takeaway from this event. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for the to everyone in the audience. I can see lots of hands clapping. Thank you. You were brilliant, and your questions were brilliant. Thank you for attending. And I know a lot of you are, on the ground as well. So it's heartening. All of this is heartening. And okay, so I think I will invite actually the speakers and Nicola to just stay behind for 5 minutes if you have the time, and just to debrief. And thanks everyone for joining us. See you next year for the next set of social theory events. I won't be the director anymore, but there's someone who's equally, even probably better than me, who will be taking over. So see you all. Enjoy your evening.